You know, we sit here in Kansas City and we talk about all the big happenings, things that have gone on, things that may go on. And one of the biggest issues that we talk about when it makes the headlines but really needs to get more attention is the fact that Kansas City right now has a free bus fare system that simply isn't working. It means the bus system's underfunded. It means that you have vagrants, basically kicking their feet up on the bus and having a grand old time. We've heard, by the way, from bus drivers in Kansas City. They've talked to local news outlets, and they've said, hey, this job is not what it used to be. I've got to deal with people that I don't have to normally deal with because of free bus fare. So what do you do about it? Patrick Touhey is joining us in studio. He's with the Show Me Institute, Missouri-based think tank. Hey, great to have you back, by the way.
It's a pleasure to be back. Thank you.
You were gone for a couple of years, and now you're back in the saddle with the organization. How's that feel?
It feels good. They've got a great research team. You've had the guests on, David Stokes and James Schulz, Susan Pendergrast. Just it's great to be back with them, and it's such a good it's nice to hang out with other researchers because it's inquisitive minds, and it's a matter of figuring out how do we go get the information we want to use, and that's a pleasure.
So, by the way, you're also writing now for the Kansas City Star, so that's some exciting news. That they want some different opinions, different viewpoints in their newspaper. So I'm happy to hear that. So let's do free bus fare.
Sure.
How long has it been going on again? I think it was right around COVID it started.
Yes.
And why is it at this point a failure?
Well, so they started this about 4 years ago. They had talked about it publicly. There had been some national coverage that Kansas City had gone free when it, in fact, hadn't. But they hadn't really done any serious research about what the ramifications were. And it was frustrating for a researcher because there was so much work out there. So many other cities had tried free fare pilot programs and gotten rid of them. And their experiences should have been brought to KCATA and said, here's what other cities did. Instead, they commissioned a really laughable economic impact analysis from UMKC, which, again, is I encourage people, if you can find copies online, and they are out there. It was the conclusion was nothing but talking about a Marxist Frenchman who died in 1991. So it was an economic impact analysis. So anyway, we went free bus fare. Yeah. And we can talk about what the pressures were to do that. And, of course, fare dropped or revenue dropped to zero. The pandemic happened. They lost some riders. But as you said, people were riding buses for other reasons than commuting. It was a shelter they could provide. So they used COVID money. KCATA used COVID money to make up for the money they had lost. That runs out in 2025. And so now, to their credit, they are trying to figure out, the bus authority, are trying to figure out how do we reintroduce fares? How do we patch up this huge operating budget shortfall we have? And how do we move forward? And I congratulate them for doing that. I wish they had been more thoughtful 4 years ago and never embarked down this path.
Well, here's the political dilemma, and it kind of is what you touched on there. The reason they did, I believe, free bus fare, they'll never admit this, but they had this, fun little streetcar that was free.
Right.
And it served mostly tourists and people of means downtown.
Right.
And it's a bad look to have a free streetcar for people of means downtown and for tourists from Kansas when you're charging working class to working poor people a couple of dollars to ride the bus. It's just a bad political look. And that's why this happened.
You're exactly right. It certainly is a bad political look. It was what people talked about when they advocated for free bus fare. But the revenue stream for the streetcar is not by fare. It comes from property taxes along their route. The KCATA has a completely different model for their buses. Again, I absolutely understand the optics politically. KCATA really should have spent so much more time thinking about this before jumping in.
Well, they were kind of pressured during everything, right? I mean, the answer would have been to charge for the streetcar, right? Charge $1 or $2 for the streetcar.
I understand they were pressured, but had they done legitimate research, they could have fended that off. They could say, look, it just doesn't make sense. They could have said to advocates, where do we get this money from?
Yeah.
To make up for the loss in fare. And again, that's what they're struggling with now. It's a completely unnecessary mistake.
But it's like anything else in government. Once you give people something for free, I put up the air quotes, there's no free lunch, how the hell do you get out of it?
And I congratulate Frank White III, who's there now. Michael Shaw is one of the board members, and as reported in the Star, they're having the very real conversations. Like, we've got to figure this out. You're absolutely right. The politics is one thing. People are showing up to ATA meetings demanding zero fare forever. But the policymakers, the guy in charge, have to fix this, and it's not easy.
But the mayor is saying, hey, we shouldn't have, he's kind of doing the political thing of saying, no, we've got to make it free. Find the money wherever you got to find it. He's also saying Kansas, Johnson County should be chipping in some money to keep it free. Is that the answer?
I don't imagine that Kansas will be chipping in. Kansas City has a very bad record with bi-state. The municipalities.
What about his buddy Mike Kelly in Johnson County, the commission?
Yeah, these guys have played with Kansas City before and generally don't enjoy doing it. Kansas City can be a real difficult entity to work with. But look, the KCATA has to figure this out. Again, I congratulate them for tackling it, but saying I wish we had or we should have isn't an answer to how do we have, and nobody knows that right now, and the status quo isn't working.
There's the revenue side, as you've noted. Then there's also, the safety side of this.
Yes.
The stupidity of having free buses and allowing anyone and their mother to walk on that thing without any fear of consequence, and nothing can be done. What about that side of it?
I've requested from KCATA records about their safety issues. I understand that they are spending a lot more providing security people on the buses because, as you mentioned earlier, the drivers don't feel safe. And again, we've got to make sure that the bus system provides what is it intended to provide, which is transportation from people getting to and from work or other services. And it's a lot of people complain about the idea of free government services in the first place, but I think transit, certainly public spending on transit, is absolutely legitimate. But it has to serve its basic purpose, which is transporting people. If you make it into a social welfare program, if you make it into rolling shelters, which is what's happened, you're not only not doing that well, you're not doing your original purpose well.
And even at the price of a couple bucks a ride, that's still a subsidized ride.
Absolutely, it's a subsidized ride. And I think that is a legitimate service that government can provide. But look, all the customer service surveys around the country, when you ask people who rode public transit, they didn't complain about the fare. They wanted better services.
Yeah.
They wanted safety, better buses, better equipment, better schedules. They wanted the buses to go to places where they needed to go. But fare was never one of their top concerns. And again, Kansas City could have learned all this if it simply made an effort to.
So they're now not only losing money by not having any revenue come in, but they also are spending money on, off-duty cops on these buses?
So they contract with Titan Security. And again, I understand that their need for security personnel has gone up significantly in the past 4 years, but I'm trying to get records from them right now, and I haven't gotten them yet.
Wow. Okay, so where does this go from here? We've got a year until the COVID money runs out for the buses.
Right. So the Frank White III, the CEO of KCATA, has asked the board, hey, can we move ahead on studying how to collect fares and everything from the cost of putting fare boxes in to deciding what fare ought to be, what the fare ought to be. Mm-hmm. Those are all important. He's asked for permission. The board has, kicked it to the next meeting. They don't want to make a decision. Again, you've got activists there demanding free fare forever. So they're struggling with it, but they know what they've got to do. They just need to pull the trigger and do it. And again, provide a better bus experience for who should be their real customers, which is people trying to get to work. Maybe you can go to the meetings and go up against the activists. I may attend. If nothing else, I'm just curious to observe it. But from what I've seen in the reporting in the Star, the guys who are making the decision, they know what they're struggling with. They are asking all the right questions, and I don't envy their job.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm just glad you're back with the Show Me Institute, Patrick Touhey. It's good to have you here, man.
Well, thank you so much.
And you're welcomed here anytime.
Very good.
There you go. He's Patrick Touhey, the Show Me Institute. You'll also be reading him in the Kansas City Star once a week. Is that the plan?
Yes, sir.
All
once
right.
a week.
Once a week, he's going to be writing in the Kansas City Star. Good stuff.